So in this really quick video, we're going to look at a Christian festival's practice 12 marker. Easter is the most important Christian celebration. So remember that Easter is the celebration to remember the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. And the other main Christian celebration, of course, is Christmas. So what this question is wanting you to do is to decide whether Easter is more important than Christmas, or Christmas is more important than Easter. And of course, you can bring in any other Christian celebrations that you know, but those are the two that are in the AQA spec. So let's look first of all at why both of these celebrations are important, and then we'll be able to hopefully form some arguments for which one would be more important. So Easter is important in Christianity because it's the day Jesus rose from the dead after being crucified. And for Christians, it celebrates that Jesus conquered sin and death by rising from the dead and proving that he was fully God as well as being fully human. In many ways, Easter and the beliefs that it remembers around the resurrection are the foundation of all of the rest of Christianity. And the celebration of Easter comes at the end of the 6-week period of Lent, where Christians have focused on their religion, often by making sacrifices, giving things up, or doing extra acts of worship, for example. And Easter also follows Holy Week, where the events in the last week of Jesus' life and his crucifixion are remembered. So why is Christmas important? Well, Christmas is a celebration, of course, to remember the birth of Jesus. Jesus was born in a humble stable, but there were also signs that he was destined for great things, such as the visit from the 3 wise men and the virgin birth. Christmas, of course, also reminds Christians about the miracle of the incarnation and their belief that the Word became flesh and lived among us. Christmas comes at the end of the 4 weeks of Advent. The 4 Sundays in the run-up to Christmas Day mark the occasion. And Advent is a time of reflection and preparation for Christians in the run-up to Christmas, which may help make it important. So again, let's just remind ourselves how these two Christian celebrations are actually carried out. So how is Easter celebrated? Well, after solemn and serious church services to remember the crucifixion on Good Friday, Easter Sunday is the start of the Easter season, which is a season in the church of joy and celebration. The churches are often filled with flowers and joyous hymns are sung. Catholic, Orthodox and Anglican Christians often attend evening services on the Saturday night before Easter Sunday, which they usually begin in darkness to represent the empty tomb. And then candles are brought in to symbolise that Jesus has risen and is the light of the world. Christians also often celebrate Easter by eating eggs, whether chocolate or otherwise. How is Christmas celebrated? Well, there's an emphasis often on the telling of the Christmas story, using the gospel accounts of the events of Jesus' birth that are found in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. Many churches in the run-up to Christmas also hold carol services where they retell the story and sing special hymns that highlight the significance of this event as the time when God took on human form in Jesus through the incarnation. Lights are often lit in churches at Christmas and are also used to decorate homes to symbolise the light of God coming into the darkness of the world. Church services are also traditionally held at midnight on Christmas Eve. So now let's have a look at how we might form some arguments to say why Easter is the most important celebration and then also why it isn't. Remember, in a 12 marker, you need arguments both for and against. So this is an example of how you could form those. So why is Easter the most important Christian celebration? Well, firstly, Easter is when Christians remember the resurrection of Jesus from the dead, as we've just seen, which is the most important story in Christianity and essentially is the reason for Christianity to exist. This is because the resurrection showed that Jesus was fully God as well as fully human, providing proof to support the belief in Trinity. Christians also believe that the resurrection proved that Jesus had defeated death and sin, and so this is also celebrated at Easter, making it super important as a time for celebration. Secondly, Easter comes at the end of the season of Lent and the events of Holy Week, when Christians have been focused on their religion the whole time and on the key events at the end of Jesus' life. Many Christians take part in fasting and extra worship during this season to prepare for Easter. The preparation during Lent and then serious reflection on the crucifixion on Good Friday mean that the celebrations and happiness of Easter are extra special. Thirdly, the resurrection of Jesus gives Christians hope that they will also be raised from the dead when they die. Easter is an important celebration to remember this belief and be grateful that Jesus made this possible through his death and resurrection. Remember that to support this, in the Bible, Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and the life." So there we have three clear reasons why it could be argued that Easter is the most important Christian celebration. It's also, I think, important to state here that the church itself, the Christian faith itself, would see Easter as the most important Christian celebration too, for the reasons that we've just outlined. However, for our exam in a 12 marker, we have to be able to give some counter arguments. So how could we argue, despite the fact that the church itself says that Easter is the most important Christian celebration, that it isn't? Well, firstly, we could make an argument that Christmas is more important than Easter because it remembers the belief in incarnation. Remember the phrase, "the Word became flesh and lived among us." And if it wasn't for the incarnation and Jesus taking on human form, obviously the resurrection wouldn't have been possible. So Christmas is remembering the beginning of the story. Easter remembers the end of Jesus' story on earth, and you can't have the end without the beginning. I think it's also important to remember too that Christmas could be seen as a more important Christian celebration than Easter in many countries like Britain today, because people who only attend church maybe once or twice a year are probably most likely to do so at Christmas if they're Christian. There are lots of events around Christmas in churches, like carol services, and those encourage people to go to church and take part in festivities and celebrations, even if they don't usually go. And Christmas is perhaps a lot more accessible in terms of an opportunity to worship than the Easter services may be for that reason. Thirdly, it can also be argued that Christmas is potentially more important because the beliefs behind it are just easier for people to understand, which make them more meaningful. The story of Jesus being born in a stable is very familiar. It's much easier to understand than the idea that a man could be crucified on a cross to save us from sin and then rise again to show that death is defeated. So again, for that reason, you could say that maybe Christmas is just more important for Christians today because it's just a more accessible celebration. Finally, I think you can also make the argument that both Christmas and Easter are actually equally important, that there isn't a most important Christian celebration. They both are times for people to focus on their religion. They're both opportunities for the Christian community to come together in worship and praise, and they both relate to really important beliefs in Christianity, incarnation and resurrection. So just to finish, remember that to take the information we've just gone through and make a really successful 12 marker, we need to make sure that we follow the advice that the exam board give. So we have to make sure that we're referring to Christian teaching in our answer. So in the video we've just gone through, I've mentioned a couple of Bible quotes that you could use to help you. We would need to remember to have arguments to support the statement and against, which we've gone through. And you also need to make sure that at the end, you come to a justified conclusion where you very clearly state overall whether you think Easter is the most important Christian celebration or not.